on this video, then you absolutely need to be here. I know that talking about or discussing controversial topics can be very, very challenging as a woman in leadership, or perhaps you are a man in leadership. And in this video, I'm going to share with you my strategies, my framework that I use personally to be able to communicate in those more very controversial, highly contentious, high stakes type of conversations. I'm going to share with you a framework today, and I'm also going to share with you some personal stories of myself so that you can understand and have a glimpse as to what happens sometimes when you're having to talk about controversial topics. And then I'm also going to give you some insight in terms of what you can start doing to help yourself be prepared for these situations. Now, this channel specifically focuses in advanced communication skills and strategies. There's plenty of videos on YouTube that talk about communication, and I'm here to support you with that. But I'm really here to help you be able to communicate more confidently and concisely under pressure. And if this sounds like something you're interested in, you definitely want to like this video because we're going to talk about it live here on the channel. I want to say hello to Cat 23rd. Hello, Cat. Good to see you, friend. Cat says, hello, Doc. Hey, Doc. Good to see you, Cat. So there's a lot of things that come up when you are dealing with more controversial type topics. And before I go into that, I do want to let you all know that my target audience are women in leadership, and I thank you for the heart emojis. This is my target audience who I work with specifically as it relates to my executive coaching and consultation services. However, if you are a man in leadership or someone that is thinking about leadership, I guarantee you that you're going to learn something from this channel on any of my live videos that will help you to communicate better in those very challenging and complex situations. Now, when it comes to controversial topics, and I want to know from you, when have you had to talk about a controversial topic? When? Put it in the comments below. Let's talk about it. So controversial topics are situations rather, that are truly a defining moment in your leadership. Now, I will say that a lot of times leaders will tend to straddle the fence a little bit as it relates to controversial topics. Why? Because sometimes they don't want to take a position. You see a lot of this happen oftentimes in politics and et cetera. You'll see politicians that will just be right in the middle. They don't want to say yes, they don't want to say no, or they like it or they don't, and they end up being in the middle. Well, sometimes as a leader, you have to make those decisive situations and conversations, which is the reason why it's so important for you to really think about how do you talk or speak to your teams as a leader in those controversial situations. So the first thing, we talked about this a little bit this morning, was that you have to know your triggers. Now, I'm going to share with you that even though you may know your triggers, you need to know what are the comments that will make you upset, what are the comments that will cause you to be really angry, what are the things that trigger you, that emotionally bring a response where you just think, oh my gosh, I can't believe somebody said that, and it takes you into that emotional state. You need to know your triggers first. Those are very, very important. However, there are going to be times where you may not know you have a trigger until it happens. And I'm going to share with you personally when this actually happened to me. When these situations come up, it's really important for you to take it as it is and remember the skills and strategies I share with you in terms of how you communicate when you're under pressure, pausing, giving yourself some space, all those things that we're not going to talk about today. But I do want to let you know that even though you can prepare for majority of your triggers, there are going to be some triggers that happen to you that you did not know were triggers for you. So let me give you an example that what happened to me personally, and then I'll talk to you a bit about the next two strategies or steps in my framework that I use when I need to talk about more controversial topics. When I was a C-suite executive and I was managing, as many of you know, I am a dentist, and I have obviously done a lot more things outside of dentistry, which is why I'm talking to you today. But in my role as a C-suite executive, we were in the process of trying to get buy-in from our board to purchase a mobile dental unit or try to apply for a grant for it. It was a very big grant. It was a lot. And at that particular time, I want to say hello, welcome to those of you who are joining live today. We're talking about how to speak during controversial topics. If you have been in a controversial situation or conversation, Let's talk about it in the comments below and let me know what part of the big, beautiful world you all are joining from today. Now, as I mentioned, what happened to me? I worked as a C-suite executive, and this is personally what happened to me when I had a trigger that I didn't know was a trigger. And I'm going to bring it up because it came up here just recently. We were talking about children. And if many of you do not know, there are kids that have died because they have had dental infections in their mouths. That has happened. And there are adults that have died because they had dental infections in their mouth. What happened to me is when I was talking to my board at the time and communicating with them about why we need to purchase this unit and why this was important, I talked to them about how they don't see how many kids or how many calls I get from nurses and from children that are at school. They can't learn at school because their tooth hurts too bad, or they stayed up all night crying because they couldn't go to sleep because their tooth hurts so much and they have an abscess and they're infected and all those things. And I want to say hello to Neon Banana Guy. Hello, welcome, welcome. But what happened is when I was explaining it to them, all of that I deal with every single day as a doctor with children, dental infections, they can't learn, they can't sleep, they can't eat, they can't function because they have an abscess or infection in their mouth. It hit me. It hit me in such a way that I became teary-eyed when I was talking to my board. Now, normally, me in the tears is not something I do often, by no means, because that's just not how I've been just trained to communicate. But it was a trigger for me that I didn't know that I had. And when it happened, I felt really embarrassed because I was like, oh my gosh, I just sit there and just got teary-eyed in front of this board. But then when people talked to me afterwards, they said, wow, you were really passionate about this. And I didn't know that was a trigger for me. I had no idea that was a trigger for me at all because I just didn't know. I was talking about it and it just was something that was so deeply personal to me because I see little kids like this all the time that are like, they can't learn, they can't speak, they can't eat because they're hurting and they're infected. So that was a trigger for me. So why do I mention this to you? Because when you have those moments, and as I mentioned, when it's a controversial topic that's coming up, when it's life and death and things like that, you may encounter a trigger you didn't even know that you had. And it's good to reflect on that because then you can think and say, oh, why did I get so emotional about that? Why did that bother me so? Then you can say, that's a trigger I didn't know that I had. So you just take it in the back of your mind. Fast forward to yesterday, there was a email notification or a post that I saw that talked about there was a man that was in a ICE detainee camp, detention facility here in the United States. This man had a dental infection in his mouth. He told them he was in pain. They just gave him pain medication and gave him pain medication. Well, what happened? This particular person, the infection in his mouth spread to other parts of his body, and he died. He died. And I felt like that's not how we treat humans here, period. But that's definitely not how we should treat each other in the United States. And when I read it and I responded to the post, I could tell it was a trigger for me because it came back to, I don't want to see anybody suffer. I don't want to see anybody die over dental infection. Like, these are preventable diseases that happen. And it brought up something in me, and I was just like, this is something that is really, 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 very, 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 very deep and personal to me because I see it all the time. Why do I mention this? There may be situations that come up for you where that trigger will catch you off guard. And you may say, whoa, I didn't know that was a trigger for me. But the good thing is, if you identify it and say, I know this is a trigger for me, the next time this situation comes around about that specific topic, then you know I need to rephrase how I think. I know that this is a trigger for me. I didn't know it was a trigger for me at the time, but I knew it was, and I need to be more mindful that this may bring up an emotional response to me, and how do I want to manage it, and etc. So that's one way that you need to know your triggers, but keep in mind, there may be situations, especially with controversial topics, that may trigger you in a way that you did not know it was going to trigger you. That's okay. Just make sure you still respond in a very calm and respectful way, which is what I did. But I wanted to share that with you because it can happen. especially in controversial topics. All right, so I want to say hello again, Neon Banana Guy. Hello, welcome. Cat 2030 says emotional trigger. Topic, situations that provoke strong emotional reactions. Yes, Kat, that is very, very good observation for you. And that is correct. Sometimes you will find yourself not knowing that this is a trigger until it hits you. And you're like, whoa, I did not know that was a trigger for me. Let me work on this. But yes, those very strong emotional situations are typically very, very strong triggers. You have to be mindful of. You can still manage them, but you have to be mindful that sometimes your responses may show emotion. But I'm going to go into why showing emotion, depending on the context, and especially in controversial situations, is something you might want to do. All right, but Neon Banana Guy says, are you a doctor? Yes, I am a doctor. Cat 23rd says, certain phrases that cause anxiety, memories associated with loss, criticism that triggers defensiveness. Yes, high five, Cat. That is exactly right. And that is very well said, Cat. Because all the things that Cat mentioned, these are items, these are triggers that you can potentially have, especially if you're talking about a controversial topic. So the next time you're planning for a controversial topic, think about it. Think about it and think to yourself, this is controversial. How can I still respond, but then make sure that I am keeping my emotions in check? And I thank you for the high five, Cat. I appreciate that. Now I want to go into my second step in my framework that I normally do when I'm talking about controversial topics. So first, thank you for the heart emojis, friends. I need to know my triggers. I need to know my triggers and understand that there is always the possibility of finding a trigger that may come up for you that you didn't realize that you had if it's a highly emotional charged situation and you just didn't really process or think about it. The second thing I do is when I'm talking to my teams, if it's a controversial topic, is to truly show some empathy. Understand that if it's controversial, people's emotions are going to be here, they're going to be there, they're going to be down here, they're going to be all over the place. And it's important to know as a leader to keep in mind that everyone may be feeling differently about a topic. Now, regardless of how you feel as a leader, you may agree or you may disagree. But remember, it's okay to disagree. And I think a lot of times, especially in the world today, people forget that we don't all have to think the same. It's okay for us not to agree on something specifically. It's okay for us to agree. But being able to at least have that dialogue and have that empathy to think to yourself to say, I know my team may not agree, or I know some of my team may agree, they may not agree on this topic. That's okay. Knowing that will set you apart from any other leaders. Because a lot of times when leaders are in those very highly contentious, high stakes, controversial type of conversations, they may bring their emotions into it. And they may say, well, I don't like this, I don't like that. And a leader listens first and then responds. And you can't listen with your ears if you already have your own agenda that you want to set. Now you have to kind of know what you want to talk about specifically. That's why you know your triggers, you plan ahead and all those things that I talk about a lot on my channel. But specifically, if it's a controversial topic, you have to truly be mindful and be in tune with the room. All of the skills I talk about in terms of observing what's going on, facial expressions, body language, listening to tone of voice, managing your emotions, all of those things are important for you to be able to gain a sense of what the room is thinking so that you can respond in a way that is like a leader. Then my third strategy that I share with you all is the actual delivery of the information. Now there's one thing, let me see, Robert, hello, Robert, welcome, hope you're doing well today. Now there's one thing that comes up when you're talking to people when it's a controversial topic. And that is, there has to be some form of a conviction there. Okay, when I mean conviction, sometimes it's a controversial topic. You can't just straddle the fence sometimes. Sometimes you got to either say yes or you got to say no. And you need to make that decision. Being a leader, means you are decisive. You have to be very, very, very decisive. Sometimes you may need to be in between, but if it's a very highly controversial topic, you need to be prepared to make a decision and decide exactly what it is specifically that you need to go into. Now, let's go into the chat. So Robert says, I have a question to ask, ma'am. Absolutely, Robert. You know I'm here for you, friend. Ask me anything. And for those of you joining, welcome, welcome. Let me know what part of the big, beautiful world you are in today. You're joining from today. Thank you for the heart emojis. And let me know what questions, or have you been in a controversial conversation? Have you? Let's talk about it in the comments below. Cat 2030 says, can information asymmetry be considered a controversy in a topic? It can be. I think so. If the information is not, if it's not completely symmetrical, I believe that it can be definitely considered a controversy, because there's something about it that's not maybe what people think it should be. And a lot of times controversy, when you think about the word itself, that means there's something going on. There's an aspect of one argument that's right, one argument that's wrong, or maybe to the extreme. So I think sometimes when it comes to information and when you're talking about specific asymmetry of it, it can be considered something of a controversial topic, because you feel like you get a sense that all the information you're being given is not truly being given. And there's a lot of cases that are going on here now in the world today where we feel like we're given some information, but we're not really given the full story. And so it does make the information not symmetrical as we like for it to be. Now, while, excuse me, I'm waiting for Robert's topic, let me know if you all have ever had to have a controversial conversation as leaders. Let me know in the comments below. I appreciate you all being here today. And if you're new to me, welcome, welcome. If you're one of my amazing subscribers, such as Kat and Robert, welcome back, friends. I'm so glad that you're here today. Now, I talked to you a little bit about my third strategy, and that is you have to make a decision. There has to be some conviction. And as I mentioned earlier, when I talked about my personal story of triggers that caught me off guard, there's emotion that sometimes you need to show. Does that mean you need to just go crying and yelling and screaming and running around? No, you don't need to do that. But there are times when you need to show emotion when it comes to controversial topics. Why do I say that? Because the people that you're communicating with, they need to feel you. Meaning specifically, they need to feel and understand, where do you sit on this specific issue? If people don't understand where you are or what your thoughts are about certain issues, it makes it difficult for them to trust you. Even if they don't specifically, maybe they don't agree with your issue or your stance on the issue or your stance on this controversial topic, that's okay. At least they know where you stand. And that's something, if you have to bring in emotion, you do. When I say bring in emotion, I don't mean crying. I don't mean necessarily getting upset. Like, for instance, I mentioned to you earlier, if I was teary-eyed, I'm not crying. I just know that there's an emotion that's there. And a lot of it has to do with your tone of voice, how you speak, your facial expressions. All of those things come together to show emotion. And if you're trying to show emotion in a controversial topic, you definitely want to use more of your facial expressions, where you're either showing excitement or you're showing just like sadness, like you're just really sad. Your voice should be a little bit lower, and all those wonderful things we talk about on my channel. So if you have not subscribed to the channel, you definitely want to do that for sure. All right, Robert. Okay, Robert says 3 of my team users, Mary, David, and Steve, are asking to leave the same day. Oh boy, Robert, these are fun. Mary's leave is planned a week before for a family function. David is very sick and he can't come to the office. And Steve met with an accident and he is in the hospital. Oh my goodness. Well, I hope Steve recovers. I need one of them to come to the office to complete work. Otherwise, it will become a serious work escalation. Now, my question is, as a lead, whom I have to give leave? Robert, that's a tough one. And I'm going to tell you why this is a very, very challenging situation. But this is a good challenging situation, because this is definitely a high stakes conversation. Okay. Why is this hard? Let's talk about Robert's situation. Robert has 3 employees, Mary, Steve, and David. He needs Mary, Steve, and David. He needs all 3 of them there working. But there's some things going on that have changed the dynamic. Steve is in an accident and he's in the hospital. Steve is out of the picture. He's in a hospital. When anytime you have someone that's on a leave, you need to figure out why. So is Steve at the point where he is not able to function, he's not able to work? If so, that's fine. You just have to have a doctor's or get not an excuse necessarily, especially when someone is in a hospital. You don't want to be that kind of boss, but you do have to recognize that if he's not able to work, then Steve is not able to work. Steve is out of the picture. Okay, he's in the hospital unless if he's in a hospital for an extended amount of time. And Robert, it sounds like he probably will be. That is something that I would highly just recommend for you just to you have to kind of count Steve out. Now for David, on the other hand, David is sick, correct? David is sick. Let me make sure I go back. David is very sick. He can't come to the office. Okay. So for David, you don't have to go into details, but if I have somebody that's in the hospital, somebody that's sick, and somebody that is planned to be off for a family function, it depends on your situation. And I'm just going to tell you honestly what I would do in that case. I would have to find out more information about Steve. We know Steve is in the hospital. How long is Steve going to be in the hospital? Even though these are very difficult conversations, but Robert, as a lead, you have to know these things, friend. You have to know, how long is Steve going to be out? Is Steve going to be out for another week or two? Or is Steve going to be out for another month? Does Steve need to be on FMLA? Like, what's going on? I need to get some insight on Steve and check on Steve. I mean, you're really, really kind, very gentleman. So just check on Steve. Steve, what's going on? How are things going? How long is Steve going to be out? Okay, do you have an idea? Have they talked to you a little bit about what's going on? Don't talk about the job. Just come from a place of caring as a manager. What's going on? How long how long do you think you'll need some time off, etc. Leave it at that. Don't say nothing about work. Just check on Steve, because that's data you need to start making some calculations in terms of what you're going to do. David, you need to find out what's going on with David. How long is David going to be out? David, how are you feeling? I just want to check in with you. I want to see how long you feel, how long do you think you'll be out of work? Because you have to gather data. Whenever you have to make those hard decisions like that, Robert, you need data, friend. And knowing some insight about what's going on with Steve, knowing some insight about what's going on with David is going to be helpful, because they're both, one's in the hospital, one's sick. You can still have conversations with them and just check on them, see where they're at. Now, let's say Steve is out, David's out. They're going to be out for at least the next 2-3 weeks. Okay, I'm just hypothetically saying, if you know some of that data, then share with me and we'll talk a little bit more about it. And then you have Mary. Mary already has a family function planned. Personally, if I was in that situation, Steve is out for a couple weeks, David is out for a couple weeks, and Mary already asked time off, I would start picking up somebody's slack. And I know that may sound like maybe we don't do that, but and this is just me as a C-suite and as a director, this is how I have been. If somebody already asked time off, I am not going to just get their time back and tell them, I'm sorry, I can't let you have your time off. You got to come to work. I'm not that kind of boss. I would not do that, because most of the time when people have family functions and etc., they already have this plan. They already have money allocated for it. They're already going to be traveling. They already got their family. I would never want to be that kind of boss that says, oh, sorry, there's a crisis. And guess what? You know what? You're going to have to come to work. I'm sorry, I told you time off. It is the fastest way for people to not like you as a manager. No matter what's going on, they will not like you. And that's what I would do. I would find out, how can I pick up this slack and what do I need to do? That's when, for me personally, as the lead, I jump in. I jump in and do people's jobs, because this is just me as being a team player. If I have one person on my team that's in the hospital sick, I have another person in my team that is sick, and I have another person on my team that is already planned time off, then that serious work escalation is something that we're going to have to deal with. And we're going to have to figure it out. Let's see who is trained in their role specifically. And if they're not, I have to work. That's why I'm lead. That's why I'm the lead. The master, the leader should know everything. Just like in any type of kung fu movies or karate movies or any type of skill, the master knows it all. They know how to do it all. Do they do everything? No, they don't. But they know how to do everything in cases like this. That's how I would handle it, Robert. I would get your data from Steve and from David, see what's going on, get the sense of how long they're going to be out, leave Mary alone, let Mary go on her trip, and then schedule things around David and Steve to see when you're going to have somebody back in that role. And if it's too long, that work escalation you have, things happen. You pick up some extra weight if you can, and then try to disperse some of that extra weight to some of your other team members if possible. This is when crisis situations happen. We have to still be able to function. We're a team. And that's how we are a team. We take care of each other. One person's out, everybody else, thank you for the heart emojis. We work together to make this happen. We have people that are out. Let's make sure we take care of everything. And it's a work escalation. It just is what it is. You can't control all that, Robert. You're just trying to be the really awesome leader to think of it ahead and see how you want to manage it. But that's me personally. Get your data. Let Mary go. Let her go on her vacation or her family trip. Find out what the time frame is for Steve and for David, and then make your determination for there. But be prepared to just put the jacket on with Kate and then take care of a couple things. Cat 23rd says, playing devil's advocate to test ideas or stimulate critical thinking. That's how I entered controversial territory. Yes, exactly. And that is very important. And a lot of times people, when you think about debates and etc., they have to train people in that way. And that's one of the things that I do with my clients in a one-on-one setting, especially when it comes to those very more challenging topics that they're dealing with as women in leadership. We do a bit of role play. I can play either role because I've been on both sides. I've definitely been the administrator, so I know how some administrators think, even though that's not my thought process. But absolutely, it helps you, Kat, believe it or not, to start preparing. And thank you for the heart emojis. It helps you to really start preparing to communicate at a higher level and in those high stakes conversations. You can't communicate at a high stakes level if you haven't been exposed to it or you haven't dealt with it. And that's why playing that devil's advocate, as you mentioned, is important. Akitia Dekalis, hello. Akitia, welcome, friend. Akitia says the King of Greece has joined the channel of knowledge and at the same time channel of beauty. Oh, well, thank you, Akitia. That's very kind of you. And good to see you, friend. Akitia says, nice to see you, dear. When you said master and leader, I just entered the live. How are you, Flower for Dinner? I'm doing great, Akitia. I hope you're doing well too, friend. Good to see you. Okay, Robert says, perfect, ma'am. A very clear explanation. I can't ask Mary since I already approved her leave. Yes, you just don't want to be that kind of boss, Robert. You do not, or manager, lead. You just, it will trouble this person for the rest of their life. It really will. And you just don't want to do that. All right, Steve is in the hospital, so I can't disturb him. Okay, you can check on Steve. I mean, you could just ask, hey, Steve, how you doing? I think that's fair. That's not disturbing him. And David needs some rest and sleep, so I can take charge to work. Exactly. That's where you have to just pick up the extra work you need to do to support your team. Absolutely. But I would check in on them just to see how they're doing. I mean, I did that as a manager, and I didn't, as a manager in the C-suite, I didn't do it to say, hey, you got to come back to work. I didn't do that. I just checked on them and say, hey, how are you doing? You know, just how are things going? And most of the time people will say, I'm doing well. I should be back at work at this date or that date or whatever the case may be. But it's just good to check on people. I had a situation like that. I'm trying to remember what happened. I had a situation where one of my employees had to be out for a loved one for an extended amount of time, and it was serious. And I just had to just check in on the person and say, how are things going? How are you and your loved one? And that's just a part of just being a person. And then also too, Robert, that's what you have human resources for. So when you have those big disruptions in work and that type of situation, that's what you let HR know. And let HR know what's going on. And if there's anything they need to do, they'll do it. Because sometimes they may be able to provide some type of support for the individual, whether it's, I don't know specifically what it is in your industry, but sometimes HR knows more things like that. And so whenever you have those major disruptions, somebody's out. David is out for a couple of days. He needs some rest. David's probably going to be all right. But specifically for Steve, your human resources office needs to know about Steve. They need to know about Steve because they're going to reach out to Steve and just check in on him, see what he needs help with. It's good to work together as a team overall, not only just with your team as a whole, but with your human resources. Also, human resources is a very critical department for you to be very, very friendly with and understand, because when you have those really tough situations come up, you want to be able to call them and say, by the way, Steve is in the hospital. Steve is all right from what I understand, but I want to let you know. And they may say, oh, Robert, thank you for letting us know. There's a couple things we could probably do for Steve to help him right now. And then let them do the HR part. You be the wonderful lead that you are. And then let HR do their part too. All right, Robert says, thank you. Your explanations are very clear and it is easy to get some ideas. Well, you're very welcome, Robert. I appreciate that. I appreciate you asking that question. You always have some really great questions that you ask in terms of the situations you're dealing with. And that's why I know you are an amazing leader. Hey, Keitsia says, great, and thumbs up. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. So we talked a bit about when you're talking about more controversial topics, how do you frame yourself for that? I gave just a very, very brief overview. There's a lot that goes into it, but my three frameworks or three aspects of the framework that I personally use is I know my triggers and I go into those controversial conversations knowing that there may be a trigger that comes up for me that I didn't know that I had. And if I do have that, I just have to make myself balance myself out to where I don't respond in a highly emotional way. The second is to know that the room may not agree with you, or the room may feel different emotions as it relates to this very controversial topic. You have to be prepared for those highly emotional people, because when you are a leader, and if you're subscribed to this channel, hopefully you are subscribed to this channel, then you'll be able to start learning how to regulate how you are communicating, especially as it relates to your emotions. Versus your team, they may not be subscribed to my channel and they may be here, there, everywhere with their emotions. So you have to know that, expect that people are going to be at different levels, different parts of their emotional journey as it relates to this controversial topic. The third is to have some conviction. There has to be that line in the sand, friends. Sometimes you got to straddle the middle, but sometimes in controversial topics, and thank you for the heart emojis, friends, you have to go direction A or direction B. You have to make a decision. Sometimes you just don't want to be that leader that's in the middle all the time, because then people will just say, well, you don't really stand for anything. And I'm telling you, I've experienced this and I've seen people fail at this, especially as leaders. If you don't say you stand for something, then it becomes a missed opportunity for you to really showcase yourself, your executive presence, to show everyone that you are really a leader. All right, Robert says, and one more question, ma'am. Of course, Robert. My two key team members, Dustin and Sierra, are having heated conversations on the work floor. Okay, they are arguing and having a verbal fight. Now, my question is, all right, Akitia, we'll see you when you come back in 10 minutes. Bruno Simon, good evening, friend. How are you? All right, let's go back to Robert's question. All right, Robert's question is how I have to convince them and make sure I need to take a stand on both sides, since they both are the best key members on the team, but how can I take a stand? All right, Robert, let's go. Okay, so Bruno Simon says you're gorgeous. Thank you, Bruno. I appreciate that. And Robert said, whom I need to take a stand. And Bruno Simon says, I like your naturalness. Well, thank you. This is me. This is how I am. in front of you and not when I'm in front of you. There's a lot of people out here that are content creators, and a lot of people I've actually listened to that are two different people. When you speak to them and when they are online, just be mindful. But let's go into Robert's question. Robert's got two people. He has Dustin and Sierra that are arguing and yelling at each other verbally on the floor, but they are absolutely the best at what they do. You have to take a stand. Now, the reason why you have to take a stand on this for sure is because this is a disruption. Okay, Robert, they are disrupting the flow. They're disrupting everybody. And that's something where you can't have that. I don't care if they're the best at what they do. This back and forth and no, yes, no, kind of deal. That is disruptive for the team. And I know you care a lot about your team. So this is when you have to have a conversation with them. So normally what I've done in situations like that, and Robert, if you have any more context to it, you're more than welcome to tell me, friend. When you have conversations like that, the line in the sand for you is productivity. Every time your team is working and they hear Dustin and Sierra going back and forth, they are going to turn their head and look at them, right? That turning their head and looking at them, they could have been in deep thought on a project or on something you have them working on. And now their concentration has been broken because of Dustin and Sierra. When I had situations like that, I would be very, very, very firm with both of them. Because it doesn't matter who's arguing, who's yelling, who's right, who's wrong. This has to stop. We cannot have the team being disrupted because you disagree. Everyone is an adult. And this is why we learn how to communicate as professionals, because we are professionals. If you feel, and this is what I would tell them, Dustin and Sierra, this is what I would tell them. I understand that there are some challenges that the two of you are facing, or there's been some verbal escalation going on between the two of you. Can you please explain to me what's going on? Dustin, let Dustin speak. Sierra, let her speak. And I would tell them to explain to you briefly. And let them say what it is they have to say. Why? This is the same way I do any difficult conversation, Robert. I need to know what's going on in Dustin's mind and in Sierra's mind. What is going on? I need as much data as I can. I need as much as I can. And that gives me the chance to know exactly where are they coming from? Like, why is Dustin and Sierra yelling? Then you start to understand, oh, I see why Dustin and Sierra are yelling. Dustin said this to Sierra and Sierra said this. Or Sierra said this to Dustin and Dustin said this. So you need to get some data in terms of why are these two individuals yelling at each other. So I asked them, what's going on, Dustin and Sierra? I know there's been some disagreement between the two of you. It's gotten to the point where it's disrupting the workflow. I need to understand what's going on. Dustin, explain. Sierra, explain. Briefly. Once they've said what they need to say, sometimes, Robert, what will happen is people will start to escalate and start getting loud in your office or when you're talking to them. That's an absolute no-no. That's when you cut the conversation and say, no, we're not communicating that way. We're professionals. Now, let them say what they need to say. And I would let them know this. And this is just me. Okay, and I'm a very, 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 very generous person. But when it comes to distracting people and the team and that verbal arguing and etc., I'm very big on communication, and I'm not having that. So I would tell them, I understand. I appreciate both of you sharing your sides of the story and what's going on. However, I do need both of you to come together and work together. Both of you are the best at what you do. Or you can say the best. They're doing very well. They're great. Whatever word you want to use, Robert. I would say both of you are very highly accomplished in this specific role, and I need the two of you to work together. The next time I hear that there's a disruption between the two of you, there's going to be a conversation and a disciplinary action on both of you. So I do not expect this to happen again. I would be very, very firm. That's how I would have that conversation. I would want to learn what's going on, but then I would set the tone and the expectation that this is not going to happen again. You're interrupting everybody. You're interrupting the team. We are here to work together. We're not here to watch the two of you argue and yell at each other. That's how I would handle it specifically. That's how I would take a stand. Okay, Kat says, back and forth talking can lead to workspace dislikes. Exactly. Or even worse, that might affect the work environment and put the leader in a precarious situation. Exactly. Exactly. That's why when those situations come up, I am definitely a lot more affirmative and very firm when those conversations come up, because I need them to know that the next time this happens, both of them are going to be in trouble. They're going to be in big trouble. Or we're going to have a conversation. All right. So Robert says, should I connect with them one-on-one and ask them personally, or should I address them together at the same time? It depends. So you'll have to figure out what's going on with both of them. You can have a conversation with each one individually. If you have a conversation with each one individually, this is how I would do it. Have a conversation with Dustin, have a conversation with Sierra. Get data from both of them and put them together. And say, Sierra, Dustin, I've had the opportunity to speak to both of you. I understand Dustin has some concerns about this. I have Sierra has some concerns about this. And I want to make sure that we're coming up with a solution to get over these concerns. What suggestions do both of you have? I still would make it some type of a very slight dialogue if you feel like they can talk to each other without yelling and screaming. Now, if you feel like they cannot talk to each other without yelling and screaming, that's when you just completely control the conversation and there's nothing for them to say. This is what I would do. I spoke to Dustin and I spoke to Sierra. I know you both have concerns about A, B, and C, and I understand those concerns, but what I'm most concerned about is the disruption that's happening between the two of you when everyone is working, when you're yelling and arguing at each other. Moving forward, I need you to work together like professionals that you are. You're both very good at this particular role, but I need you to communicate with each other in a very respectful way in the office. The next time this happens where one of you raises your voices or starts yelling and arguing in front of the team to disrupt them again, then both of you will have a disciplinary action that will take place. Do you understand? They will probably nod their head and go about the way. That is if you need to completely control the conversation and you feel like the two of them are too volatile to have a conversation. Now, Robert, only you know the answer to that, but there's multiple ways you can do it. If the two of them are not, maybe they just have a bit of a disagreement and they're somewhat still friendly, then I would maybe talk to them collectively because we can talk it out and figure it out. But if you feel like it's highly volatile, you could do one person at a time and then meet with them together. And then you be the person that actually explains or shares the information and says, this is what's going on. This is what I see. Don't do this anymore, or you're going to have a disciplinary action. And then leave it at that. Okay, Robert says, let's see. Okay, Robert, I answered that question. Kat says, in my opinion, I'd say both at the same time because not only it stops the conflict, but the message is passed to both employees at once and both would understand what they could be causing. Absolutely. That's very true. Give me just 1 second. My daughter's like banging at the door. Hold on just a second. Okay, sorry about that. Life of a mom. So you could do that. This is, as you mentioned, Kat, you can do both. Sometimes, Kat, it just depends on the people. It depends on if these two people can communicate or if they're highly volatile. If they're highly volatile, you don't want it to get to become a screaming match. So it just kind of depends. At Keatsia says, Trump school of thought. Okay, slaps. All right, Robert says, thank you, ma'am. I got an idea of how to handle these kind of situations. All these things will help me to grow professionally from coach to leader. Absolutely, it says thanks and smiley face. Absolutely, Robert. I'm here to help you any way that I can to help you on your journey. And I know it's hard because sometimes you just don't know what to do in these situations, especially when you have employees yelling at each other. I've had that too, Robert. That's the only reason why I can share this with you in terms of what I've actually done. I've done both. I've had them individually, and then I've had them talk to each other. It just depends on how you know your team better than I do, so you know what's best. Nafesh Tikra Vlog, hello, how are you doing today? And they say, hi, how are you? I'm doing fantastically well. Anytime I'm live with you all, I'm doing amazingly well. Akitsia says, when I mentioned Trump's name, the baby cried. She probably did. She probably did, but no, they're doing some issue with the TV remote and all that. But anyways, all is well. So we talked a lot about controversial situations and topics. Akitsia, Robert, and Kat always have really great insights and appreciate them sharing those today. If you've been in a controversial topic or controversial conversation, let me know in the comments below. Let's talk about it for a few more minutes so we can see exactly what you've been experiencing. What have you dealt with? What are some questions you have? If you are someone that is new to my channel, this is what we talk about all the time. We talk about those very hard, complicated situations that come up in terms of how do you communicate with them. If you are in a salary negotiation, or you are in an interview, or a business, you're working with a business partner, or you have something else that's going on, this is the place for you to learn. I am telling you this with confidence, the utmost confidence, that there are not any channels on YouTube like this one. This channel is not only going to help you learn how to communicate, but I'm going to help you learn how to communicate in those very high stakes, high pressured situations, which is where I noticed that there's a gap on YouTube and in social media. People tell you, oh, say this, say that. And they give you all the things you need to do. But what happens when this conversation goes under pressure? That's my expertise, and that's why I'm here to help you. Akeisha said, even children resist. I know. Robert says, and one final question for today. Robert, you know I'm here for you, friend. You can ask me as many questions as you need to. Okay, Robert says, I have my team member, Kristen, who is very dedicated, consistent, and good in all. But suddenly, I get to notice his work performance are getting dropped. Okay. Then I get to know he has recently lost one of his family members. I'm sorry to hear that. He is completely broken and unable to concentrate in work. He is affected both personally and professionally. Now, as a lead, how can I give a solution to him? This is a really very much and I know it's a challenging situation, but Robert, this is actually very good. You're growing so much. Before I go into it, it's just been a absolute pleasure being able to see you develop into your promotion and your lead, and you're dealing with all these wonderful things we deal with as leaders. Now, this is a very, 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 thank you for the heart emojis. This is a big topic. This is a big topic, Robert, because this is when you need to pull in HR. Now, this person has suffered a loss, and we kind of talked about that earlier with Kat in terms of controversial topics. When someone deals with a loss, something happens, these situations can bring emotions that people may not know, or triggers they may not know that they have. And so you have to have those type of conversations in a very, very, very gentle way, which, Robert, I know that you will. So what do you need to do with this employee? Well, first, I would talk to human resources first. And this is the reason why. This person has suffered a loss. And a lot of times organizations, they will have an EAP. If you're not familiar with an EAP, it is an employee assistance program where they have the ability for people that are going through a loss or going through something, where they have someone they can talk to that is not related to the organization. It's a third party that they work with that literally is there to just support their employees. I would talk to HR first. This is an HR first specifically. When you talk to HR, tell them exactly what's going on with Kristen. Kristen is a great employee, has been doing really well, had a loss recently, and their performance has really been suffering some. What are some resources that you all feel like you may, or what are some resources that you have that can support Kristen? What are they? And have that dialogue with HR, because they're going to let you know what support they feel like they can offer to this person. Now, in terms of their performance, because I know you have your team and it's probably causing an impact on your team, this is where you want to strategize with HR. So you want to talk to HR, see what support they have, and see what are some of their suggestions they want to have as it relates to Kristen's performance right now. We know that Kristen's obviously going through a lot. And so at the forefront of everyone's mind is, how can we support Kristen? How can we really support Kristen? And how can we help Kristen improve? And so we need to acknowledge Kristen has went through a loss, and what does Kristen need? Kristen may need to take some time off. He may need to be placed on a leave so that he has time to deal with whatever he's dealing with. That is the reason why you talk to HR first in this situation. You can always check in on Kristen and say, how are you doing? Just want to check in on you. But ultimately, this situation, you have to talk to HR first, and then you can maybe have a detailed conversation with Kristen. Depending on your HR department, when I've worked in different roles, my HR department was very comfortable with me having those type of hard conversations. Some HR departments are very scripted in terms of what they say to people. I've been in different scenarios. So talk to HR and ask them, okay, these are the supports that you all have. Do you want me to talk to Kristen about this, or do you want to talk to Kristen about it? And they may say, you know what, we'll talk to Kristen. And so when they talk to Kristen, then you can at least know what the next steps are, and if you need to put Kristen on a leave. If their performance is suffering, he probably needs to be put on a leave, to be honest with you, Robert. He probably needs to take some time off, because the more he's at work, it's not working. He may be in a really tough spot. Now, there's another part of that, Robert, that you have to remember, is that Kristen may be working, obviously, for a paycheck. And Kristen may be at the point where he knows he needs to take time off. He can't maybe financially take time off. So what do? That's when you have the conversation with human resources. And that's whenever you meet, there has to be a dialogue that we've noticed that there's been a change in your production or how things are going for you. And we just want to talk to you about it and let you know we have resources available for you. We have A, B, and C. What option do you feel like would support you best right now? And Robert, Kristen may say, you know what, I need to take some time off. I really need to take some time off. I know I'm not going to get paid for it, but this has been very devastating for me. I need to take some time off. Or Kristen may say, you know what, it's been really hard, but I feel like I can improve. And then that's when you start to have the conversation about what you'd like to see happen when Kristen is in a good state, because you still have to have that conversation. And a lot of times people are kind of shy away from these type of conversations because they're hard. They're very, very hard. So talk to HR first, have that dialogue with them, let them know what's going on, see what resources they have, and then circle back around. Do they want you to talk to Kristen? Do they need to talk to Kristen, so that you know what's going on specifically? Okay. Kat says you need to find out what could be the problem that is affecting the performance, but don't come too hard with heavy questions because it might feel personal and attacked. That's why you talk to HR first, Kat, and that's a really good point. And it really ties into what we talked about today about controversial topics. This would be controversial. So talk to HR first. I would automatically talk to HR first in this situation, because you have to have these type of conversations in a very, very, very gentle way when someone has lost someone. I've seen people be very gentle in those situations, and I've seen people be very insensitive also. Akitsia says annual leave. Absolutely. Akitsia says Ramesh annual leave, few days. Exactly. There'll probably need to be some type of leave when that happens. Even if, let's say, Robert, you talk to Kristen, or HR talks to Kristen, or whatever works out, and they say, you know what, you're not going to take some time off. Just the fact you're having a conversation will make them just say, okay, well, let me think about, what I want to do and what will be the best support for me right now. Robert says EAP, Employee Assistance Program, right? Yes, I will do a research on that. Yes, absolutely. Most organizations have an EAP. I can't say the specific number because I haven't worked for all companies in the world, but most companies they have to have some form of an EAP. If they care about their employees, they need to have something, because you don't necessarily have to know your employees' life and business. It's not our place to know that, but it is okay for them to have a safe space where they can have that conversation outside of a job. How many of you have been in situations where you've had something personal going on and you didn't feel like you wanted to talk to your manager about it? Both my hands are up. And so that's what EAP is for. So definitely look into it, but just have that conversation with human resources first, Robert. That's where I would go. Aketia says must leave private, the loss and not in work. Yes, it's true, but ultimately we are people, and there's things that happen, and so we do want to be supportive. And if somebody needs time, like you mentioned, Aketia, they need to probably take a leave. And Aketia says Greek School of Management. Well, thank you for letting me know that. All right, Kat says in rare occasion, taking a leave might not work. That's because being at home could be hard where the problem is based at the time. So the escape route could be being at work most times. It depends. And Kat, that's why you have to have that conversation with that person and say, these are the resources that we have. These are the options that you can take. What do you think will be best for you? We can't make that determination for that person. We can't say, because Kat, you're right. A lot of people, they do struggle at home, but then some people, they struggle at work. Just like, for instance, in Christian, thank you for the heart emojis. In Christian situations, this is exactly what's going on. But it just depends. That's why you just have to talk to the person and see exactly what do they want to do? What is going to be best for them? Because nobody knows but them. Robert says, sure, ma'am. Thank you. I appreciate all your assistance. These ideas will be helpful for me to take the next level leader exams and get promoted. Thank you for all your contributions. Absolutely, Robert. High five, friend. You know I'm here for you any way that I can help you. Robert says, I am leaving for the day now, having some snacks and rest. All right. Robert says, we'll see you on next live. Bye for now. Have a great day. I will, Robert. Thank you so much. I appreciate you being here. And thank you for bringing up some really great topics today for us to talk about. Cat 2030 says, hence I said it's rare situation. Exactly. It can happen. Cat, absolutely. It can definitely happen when someone is either not working well or working well at home. It just depends. Everybody's different. That's why you just ask him. And thank you for the celebration hats. I appreciate that. And Robert, yes, Robert has some really interesting topics. For those of you watching the live now and watching the replay, thank you for the heart emojis and the celebration hats. He has some really good topics. He actually is a leader, and I've been able to see him continue to rise in his leadership. And he's dealing with things. As you see, like, he's dealing with real life situations that leaders deal with all the time. And all the things that we're talking about with Robert, they come down to communication and communicating in those very high stakes, high pressure situations. These are not simple scenarios that Robert's dealing with. They are very complex. And as Kat and as Aketia have mentioned, there's just different dynamics that happen with people where they may need to take a leave, or they may get upset, or they may just have another situation going on. It's so important to learn how to communicate under pressure, because it's so incredibly important to be able to navigate these situations. This is the reason why leaders struggle, because they do not know how to communicate under pressure. And that's why we interact with managers and bosses and etc. that do really insensitive things. I will share with you, I have worked at places where I've known other people that have been at the place working, and the manager, even when the person is sick, they think they're lying. Like, they think that you have to come to work if you're about to just pass out and die. They say, what time are you coming to work? There's people that are like that. And those are the type of managers that I don't want you all to be. Sometimes when managers get into manager world or they've been promoted, they do not have a well-rounded sense of how people's lives function and how to communicate with people. And they're all about production, numbers. You're sick. No, you come back to work and you work. And I talked about this, actually, it was this week, yesterday, I think, maybe yesterday, last night or so. And I talked to you all about there's a History Channel here in the United States. A documentary that I watched recently, and I don't really watch TV. I just don't. I have my own things I watch, but most of the time I'm watching news, what's going on in the world, politics, leadership, social media, business, and all of the kind of things. But I found this series called The Men Who Built America. And I talked about this because I actually liked the series. It was actually very insightful for me to learn how the country was built. But there's a part on there where it was Andrew Carnegie, where they had the workers, and they were making the workers work 10 hours a day. Ridiculous. Cutting their pay, making them work. And it reminds me of that. And I mentioned, and thank you for the heart emojis and celebration caps. I mentioned that people still have that mindset today, even though that was decades and centuries ago now. People still have that mindset today as employees. Let me know in the comments, have you ever worked for an employer that felt like you just had to work, work, work? I have. And it's interesting how this was so many years ago. That's why we have labor laws and all that. How some employers still have that mindset today. It's unfortunate, but it happens. Cat 2030 says, shout out to Rob. Absolutely. Rob definitely needs a shout out on that. Aketia says, if I will type again the name of the person mentioned earlier, the peacemaker, the baby is going to react. I will not take the risk. Love children. Well, thank you, Aketia. Exactly. Yeah, I understand that. Probably a lot of people may feel that way now. But yes, so we went over a couple things, and I appreciate you all so much for really being here and being supportive. And just as Robert came and asked questions, I'm here to really help you any way that I can. Let me know in the comments below if there's any topics that you're struggling with or you're dealing with, any challenges you're facing right now, any difficult situations and you're not quite sure, well, how should I manage this? How should I say it? What should I say? Learn from my over 20 years of experience being in some really wonderful and great conversations and being in some really contentious and very, very difficult conversations. I will help you the best way I can. If you have a topic specifically and you put it in the comments or something comes up for you when you're watching the video, just let me know. Depending on the depth that I need for the topic, I will absolutely do a video just for you and give you a shout out on that video as well. I appreciate you all so much. Let me know what you want to talk about on the channel. Let me know how I can help you. Let me know what questions, what topics. Thank you for the heart emojis. What topics, what questions, what situations, what do you want to see in the channel? Let me know in the comments below or on any video. I really am here to help you. There's some couple things I'm working on. As many of you know, I'm working on an ebook to help you all be able to communicate in those very high stakes situations. I appreciate you all for voting. And if you still can vote, that would be great. On LinkedIn, the topic that they came up with specifically was they want to learn more about high stakes communications and confidence under pressure. Those were the two main ones that LinkedIn voted on. Instagram voted on confidence under pressure. And then on YouTube, thank you for the heart emojis, YouTube mentioned confidence under pressure too. So please vote, please vote if you can. Let me know what you want to see in this ebook, because I'm going to put together a free ebook for everybody, and it's going to be for my audience so that you all can be able to communicate more concisely under pressure in those situations in more of a very structured format. So it's something that you can take a look at and read. And then later this year, I will be publishing my first book also. All right, Aketia says, you are a flowerful, great speaker. Well, I appreciate that. Thank you, Aketia. It's taken me over 20 years to speak at this level, so I appreciate that. A lot of discipline and a lot of work. Cat 23 says, last question. Of course, Cat. What question do you have? While Cat is coming up with a question, there's a couple things that I am working on right now. I mentioned to you all, and I mentioned this last year, and I apologize, I have not done it yet. But if there's any leaders specifically that you want to learn more from, or you want to learn what to say, what not to say as a leader, let me know in the comments below, because I have a couple people on the list that there's a few individuals that have asked me to do reviews on certain leaders. So when they're communicating with you and inspiring you or making you feel like, oh, I don't like this person, then I can look at a couple of their videos and I will bring down what they're doing in a more tactical, specific way that will help you, so you know specifically when these situations happen, or if you communicate like this, it's probably going to be something people like or they may not like. So let me know what leaders you want me to take a look at and do a video on. This is something that is not going to be alive. It is going to be a pre-recorded video where I'm able to play snippets and play parts of them speaking, so that I can really break it down to you and show you, why does this person inspire so many people, or why does this person make so many people mad? Let me know. All right, Akesia says USA plus Greece school of thoughts equals united. Exactly, friend. We're all we're all humans, okay? Even though we live in different parts of the world, we just all need to work together. Exactly, Akesia. I like that. Cat 2030 says, can presentism be a sign of overworking employees? Yes, I think so. I would definitely say, let me know what you think, Kat. But I think so. You have people that are like that. They're just there. And yes. My answer to you would be absolutely. It definitely can. A lot of times people just, they come to work and they work, and then you have people that are kind of keeping an eye on things. It can definitely be overworking employees. And for some unfortunate reason, some managers, not all, but some people do not understand that people need to take breaks too. I don't know why this is a hard, and thank you for the heart emojis. I don't understand why this is such a hard concept for some leaders or some managers to understand. I think this will be more in the lines of someone that's a manager. Managers manage things. Leaders lead people. And leaders understand that people have to take a break too. People get tired. When I worked as W-2, there was days when I called out and I didn't go to work. I hate to say that, but I did, because sometimes you just have to take a break. Sometimes you need a mental break, and everybody needs that from time to time. Kat says, I meant physically at work, but not fully productive, often due to exhaustion. Well, that's where it comes from. A lot of times people are just tired. They're there, but they're not really there, because they feel like they have to be there, but they're not really there. And I appreciate that clarification. But you're right. I mean, a lot of times people aren't really fully productive. So let's look at the situation where we talked about with Robert and Kristen. Kristen's there. Kristen's working, but they're not really productive. Why? Because they have something going on. They're mentally exhausted. So yes, this is a sign of overworking employees. Many people do that. People talk about it in terms of quiet quitting, where they just get to the point where they're just completely over it. They're tired of it, and they're there collecting a paycheck, but that's all that they are doing. And it's a sign of overwork. It's a sign of someone being very tired. And as I mentioned, sometimes you just have to take a break. Sometimes you need to take a break. And if the break isn't enough, then you may need to take a look at another job. And if another job is not enough, then you may need to look at the whole entire industry altogether. And if that's not enough, then you probably need to start your own business. There's a lot of different levels to it, but absolutely, Kat, I appreciate you bringing that up, friend. That is a really good insight, because there's situations where people are physically at work, but they're not really there and being productive because they're just exhausted. They're tired. How many of you have ever been in a situation like that, where you've been just exhausted and tired, but you're still there at work? I have. I think all of us have probably been in those situations, and thank you for the heart emojis, at some point in time. And overworking employees, I know we're a bit off topic for the what we discussed initially, but overworking employees is hard, and there has to be some balance there, and you have to find out what that balance is. If you're at a job, I will say this, if you're at a job and you're not at the point where you can just completely, I would say, take a lot of time off, then you have to really think about what your schedule entails and what you're working on and what you may need to slow down on. We had a conversation a while back with someone that was working too much, and they had to really take a step back and say, okay, this is burning me out. I'm really tired. I'm exhausted. And I have to just take a break. But they couldn't just quit their job. They needed to pay bills. They have things to take care of. And thank you for the heart emojis. But what they did was they had a conversation with their manager and said, what is it that you want me to focus in on? And they started to reduce their workload a bit. So that's something we have to keep in mind also. Akitia says, Cat 23rd, if you have ready show productivity and loyalty managers will understand and show compassion. I agree with that. Akitia, actually, I really do agree with that, because it just depends on your manager. I will say it depends, but I would say majority of managers know that. They know that you're productive. Just make sure your manager is a good manager and they do have some compassion, because people understand. I mean, I believe after the pandemic, a lot of things changed for a lot of people in terms of how they felt or how they believe the workplace should be. And that's been an ever-changing type of industry and topic, I would say, since the pandemic. People are a bit more understanding that people are tired and really just frustrated with things, and they need to take breaks too. And Akesia says, meant already, not ready. Yes, I understood what you meant, Akesia. I appreciate that. Akesia says USA plus Greece joint forces. Exactly. We just all need to work together, friend, from all countries. I mean, I know people have their different their issues and their history that, there's history that none of us know because we haven't been alive. But still, I mean, we're all humans at the end of the day. We just have to work together. So let me know what other questions you all have. I appreciate you so much and spending 70 minutes of your time with me today. Feel free to share this channel to some of your colleagues and your friends that you know could benefit from being able to be that person that's not interrupted at work, that person that can negotiate a higher salary, that person can have those hard conversations and still come across as an amazing leader, that person who is trying to make a big impact on the world, but know they have to have some challenging conversations to get there. Feel free to share this to anyone you know and let them know I'm here to support them any way that I can. I'm probably one of the few channels here on YouTube that will actually take time and say hello to everyone and answer their questions. I do want to continue the channel this way because this is just how I am and this is who I am. I just know a lot of people are struggling out there, and I thank you for the heart emojis. There's a lot of people struggling out there because they just don't know what to do or what to say and how to say it. And I just don't want you all to live a stressed life. I want you to at least be prepared for when those challenging situations and conversations come up. So I appreciate you all so much. I will be live tomorrow, most likely tomorrow evening. I typically on Wednesdays, because my schedule changed a bit, I will most likely be live in the evening for sure. There's a very slight possibility I may be live tomorrow, but in the morning, I don't know just yet. But I know for sure I'll be live in the evening. So I appreciate you all so much. I appreciate the heart emojis. I'm here to help you. I'm here to support you any way that I can. Just contact me on either Instagram, LinkedIn, or YouTube here. Or if you want to send me a direct message, it'll be Instagram or on LinkedIn, also at Dr. Jacinta Lamentine on LinkedIn, Instagram at Excite Excellence, and I have at Excite Excellence on LinkedIn as well. And you're always welcome to email me at info@exciteexcellence.org as well. So I appreciate you all so much, and I will see you in the next video. Bye for now.